Grief is a strong emotion in the loss of, and it doesn't necessarily have to be life. It can be a loss of a favorite toy. It can be a loss of a friendship. It can be a loss of a house, like when you're moving. So it's an emotion that expresses a loss of something. Of course, most times it's the loss of a loved one.
I think we forget about, we need to grieve the losses of a lot of other things. A loss of a relationship, a loss of self-esteem. Frequently we deal with athletes here who now are done with sports, competitive sports, and because they define themselves very often by their sports and their competitiveness and winning, and it's a process of letting go of that.
Grieving is very, very personal. You know, you go to a funeral of, you've lost your best friend, and you notice that there's some people not crying, maybe family members, they're not crying. That doesn't mean they're grieving any less or any more than anybody else, but we have this thing about when we have grief we should cry. Not for everybody. You know, grieving is a very necessary process, and there are steps, you know, to that. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did a lot of study on this and found, you know, your first step is obviously disbelief. You know, there's no way that. And then when it finally sinks in, it's like, okay, tell you what, if you make this go away, I'm assuming they're talking to their God or whomever, if you make this go away, I promise to go to church for the next 100 years. So you're doing the bargaining. Well, if bargaining doesn't work, then there may be some anger. And unfortunately, people get stuck there. And that, it's very self-destructive and can help, it can really hurt relationships. So if things are moving okay, and if people realize that yes, this is part of the grieving process, then they move to, there seems to be a certain peace, and it might even be depression for some people. It happens that it hits you, they're gone. And you, no matter how powerful you think you are, you're not going to bring them back.
I think a lot of addictions are unresolved grief. They haven't grieved well. And how do you know when you're ever done grieving? You don't. You know, there are times where you will kind of plateau out, but then something might happen where you need to grieve some more. Social media can be an important part of the process, and partially because it's just the way that especially young people communicate now with Facebook.
Well, I read this article that they said Facebook has allowed people to express honest emotions. They went on to say that social media has allowed people to, you know, have this outpouring of grief, so the person who's grieving realizes they're not the only one.
You need some face-to-face time with some people, and that they're not limiting themselves to just using social media to grieve.
What happens when you lose somebody is you don't know what to say. Well, okay, you can say, I don't know what to say. And that person, for that person, and this is my own experience, that person is just happy that you're standing next to them, or that you have your arm around them, you're holding their hand. You don't have to say anything, just your presence is powerful enough. That's all you need.